Hello, welcome. If everyone can just give me a quick hello in the chat, let me know where you're checking in from. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. We'll get started in just another minute or two. I see Sharon checking in from Minnesota. Ray checking in from Champaign, Illinois. Luann in Pennsylvania. Welcome, welcome. Hello, Kiran. It's great to see everyone. All right, I'm going to give it just another minute before we get up and running here. Let me know while we're checking in, let me know what your favorite workout is. Hi, Marilyn from St. Louis and David from St. Louis as well. Nice to see you both. All right. Well, I'd love, as everyone's checking in, I'd love to just get started here. So hello and welcome to our latest installment of Let's Keep Moving with the APDA. So over the next 3 months, my colleagues and I will be presenting a series entitled your PD Exercise Toolkit. I'll be presenting part 1 today, the basic elements of an effective PD exercise program. As a quick introduction, I'm a physical therapist from the BU Center for Neurorehab, and we partner with the APDA for the Rehab Resource and Referral Center. You can see our team here. If you're interested in our contact information or you'd like to follow us on social media, you can also see our contact information here. So the big question that I'm trying to answer today is, what are the main components of an effective exercise program for someone with Parkinson's? In many of our past presentations in the Let's Keep Moving series, I've tried to kind of let everybody know about the Be Active and Beyond booklet, which is an APDA publication, and it's free for download off of the APDA website. This is a publication our team developed, and today I really want to mention it right from the start, because near the beginning of this booklet, there's an answer to our overall question today. So you can see the components of an exercise program that we list in the booklet are up on the slide right now, but I want to go over each of these in a little bit more detail today. One thing that I think some of you are probably noticing when you look over our list of exercise types is that these exercise categories are just generally good for everybody's health and fitness, not just people with Parkinson's. But I think one of the key things that I want to do with our talk today is just go over the specific reason why these exercises aren't just good for your overall health and well-being, but are also good specifically for your Parkinson's symptoms. Another thing I should mention really quickly at the start of my presentation today is that the presentation itself is intended to be more for general information. So I don't want this to be interpreted as specific individual medical advice. So please do consult with your doctor and physical therapist to determine the safest way for you to work towards these general guidelines that we'll be discussing today. Now, the first type of exercise that I want to go over is aerobic exercise. You can also see it sometimes referred to as cardiovascular exercise. So these terms we'll use a lot together. I'm going to do my very best not to keep going back and forth today, just to keep it from getting confusing. But there's been a lot of exciting research on this particular type of exercise that's come out in the last 4 years. So keep in mind, when we say aerobic exercise, this can take a lot of forms. So things like walking, jogging, using an exercise bike, or using an elliptical machine are just some common examples of aerobic exercise. Just like there are different ways of getting this exercise in, you can also work at different intensity levels while you're doing aerobic exercise. So we can use broad terms like moderate and vigorous intensity to describe the two different intensity levels of aerobic exercise. My friend Teresa Baker, who will be helping me with the Q&A today, had a whole presentation on this in the Let's Keep Moving series a few months ago. So feel free to go back to the APDA website or our YouTube channel to see if you can find a little bit more information from her on just exactly what we mean when we say vigorous or moderate intensity exercise. So a common question that many of my patients will ask me, many people with Parkinson's will ask is sort of, what's the best way to get the endurance exercise in? Should I be walking or jogging, or should I be using an exercise bike? And I want us to talk about the latest research. So on the left, we'll show you a study that was published in 2018 on treadmill exercise. So they had participants who are just recently diagnosed with Parkinson's, and they randomized them into 3 groups. So there was a high intensity treadmill exercise program, a moderate intensity exercise program, and a weightless control. After 6 months of doing the exercise, they found that the high intensity group had actually progressed less in terms of their motor symptoms. You'll probably recognize the tests that they use, by some things that your neurologist might ask you to do when they compared the high intensity group to the control group. They also noticed that the participants were able to work at the intensity goals. So the participants were able to work at a vigorous intensity for the whole 6 months. So they were in the vigorous group, they were able to get up to 80% of their maximal heartbeat, which we weren't sure how easy that would be at the beginning of the study. Now on the right, we have another study that was published in 2019 on home cycling for people with mild to moderate Parkinson's. They compared one exercise program where participants used an exercise bike that was specialized for the study. They were using sort of like a spin bike with a computerized exercise routine. They were kind of playing a game on a tablet, and the harder they pedaled, the better they did on the game that they were playing. So it was a way to kind of encourage people, again, to work at that kind of more vigorous end of the exercise routine, exercise spectrum. They compared that cycling program to a program that was a little bit more like a stretching and relaxation program. So that was their control group. And they found that the cycling participants were also found to have a slower progression in motor symptoms after 6 months compared to the stretching group. And then cycling and treadmill exercises do have their advantages and disadvantages, but these two things are different enough that you have to wonder if the key element here is, making sure you get around to your aerobic exercise one way or the other. We also have another study on our next slide, which is about brisk walking. So this is something that came out very, very recently and exciting because, what if you don't have a treadmill? What if you don't have an exercise bike? So this article was published this year, and it was on a brisk overground walking program. This study had 64 participants, and they were either in a in a control group, or they were in a balance and walking program. The participants in the walking program were getting around to 150 minutes of exercise at a moderate intensity per week. What was interesting was that their group had actually improved their motor symptom scores after 6 months of participating in the exercise routine. Like I had mentioned earlier, I really hope this is encouraging to you because, we now have data on a variety of methods. So treadmill walking or cycling or walking over ground, and these different exercise routines have all been shown to be helpful. So again, the main point is just finding a way to get around to this aerobic exercise, no matter what method you prefer. These are simply some of the latest and biggest studies that we have. And the studies also have a nice long follow-up period to watch how people do over time. So we don't have data on every single type of aerobic exercise. We don't have head-to-head comparisons about like, is treadmill walking better than cycling? So for now, the best advice we can really give you is to just find something that you enjoy for the aerobic exercise and stick to it. You may want to consider personal factors. So for example, if you have balance problems, maybe you want to use an exercise bike so it's a little bit safer for you than going out for a walk. If inclement weather is a concern in your area, I know we just had to deal with a big storm up here in Boston. You can consider one of the indoor options like a treadmill or an exercise bike. So that way your reliability isn't impacted by the weather. So let's move on to our next type of exercise, which is strength training. And this is the use of things like elastic bands or free weights or your own body weight to give yourself resistance and build up muscle strength in your body. A key principle is selecting a resistance level or a specific exercise that's challenging enough that you'll sort of overload, is a term we use, the muscle to improve your strength. So you want it to feel difficult to do 8 to 12 repetitions when you're targeting strength training. This type of exercise is important for all of our major muscle groups. But we oftentimes, for people with Parkinson's, will particularly emphasize the large muscles in your legs and hip and core for strengthening, especially in physical therapy. These muscles just happen to be the most important for your day-to-day function. Again, you want to try to find exercises that are difficult for you to perform 8 to 12 repetitions in a set. If it's too easy, you may want to go a little bit heavier on the weight or choose a different exercise. As always, it's best to find a professional that you can consult if you're having trouble deciding how to make something a little bit harder. But then, crucially, this type of exercise is thought especially helpful for people with Parkinson's because it can help with bradykinesia, which is that slowed movement that can occur as a symptom of Parkinson's. This is because strengthening exercises can help to reinforce the connection between your brain and your muscles and give you better control of your movements. I'll show you a little bit more data on the next slide about this. So this is a good example of how strengthening exercises can help people with Parkinson's manage their symptoms. They compared one group that was doing a more gentle exercise program with a little bit of strengthening and balance and stretching to a group that the researchers called progressive resistance training, which was a little bit more intense. And interestingly, it used a lot of the weight machines that if you looked around at your local gym, I guarantee they'd have everything that they use in this study. And they had people do strengthening exercises there twice a week for a couple of years. Like I mentioned on that last slide, one of the things that was important about this group, the progressive resistance group, was that they kind of had to keep progressing their weight as the exercises started to feel easy so that the participants always felt nice and challenged. So this chart at the bottom right, I used to highlight is sort of it's sort of showing you that over the course of the 2 years, the participants in the progressive resistance group actually showed less motor symptoms than the group that was doing the more gentle exercise routine. Other researchers have also documented the functional benefits of strength training, showing functional benefits like how, if you do strength training, it can help you do things like walk farther in 6 minutes or climb a flight of stairs faster. So because it can help your function and it can help your Parkinson's symptoms, we really recommend that you include strength training in your routine. Really quickly here, like I mentioned earlier, that bigger study I showed you was using common weight training machines that they'll have at most gyms, but What if you don't have a membership? That can take time and money to get to a gym regularly, and some people aren't comfortable exercising indoors until the pandemic improves. So quick reminder that in the Be Active and Beyond booklet, we have many different strengthening exercises that require no equipment other than your own body weight. We try to pick exercises that kind of target those most important muscle groups that, like I mentioned earlier. And we even have ways of making these exercises a little bit easier or a little bit harder depending on what you need. So just keep this free resource in mind from the APDA if you'd like to try a little bit of strengthening from home. So now our next category is balance training. Parkinson's disease can have a number of effects on your balance, and we did do a whole series on the Let's Keep Moving webinars. This was about a year ago. If you'd like more detail about the ways that Parkinson's can affect your balance and what you can do about it. But for now, you can think that because Parkinson's can affect different aspects of your balance, it's important for you to work on things that will make you feel more steady, but staying safe while you do these different exercises. So you can work on things like standing on one foot, or agility training, which kind of refers to being able to stay light on your feet while you do something like turning around in a really tight corner. Researchers have shown similar benefits from doing exercise programs like Tai Chi or like Tango in a group setting compared to individualized balance exercises. So definitely keep this in mind as an option that is available for most people if you want to get a little bit more balance exercise into your routine. In addition to these guidelines, there's a few things that I wanted to tell you that we've learned from the research on balance training for people with Parkinson's disease. Down at the bottom of this slide, you'll see that researchers have demonstrated a role for leg strengthening exercises for falls prevention in Parkinson's. So, keep in mind that balance exercises work best when it's combined with the strength training that I already told you about on the last slide. Now, my second point about balance training is that it would be a good idea to start balance exercises early after your diagnosis if you can. There were 2 studies that were done recently, 2 fairly large studies that followed participants for a long time. And they both kind of found that after doing a balance exercise program for people with Parkinson's, they found things like the balance exercise training improved people's physical functioning, their self-confidence in their balance or in their ability to not fall when they go through their day-to-day activities, improve people's quality of life. There wasn't as clear of a reduction in fall frequency over the course of the study in the exercises versus the controls. But one thing that we find in the research is when you just look at people with less severe symptoms, there is a better benefit for fall prevention. So one thing you might be thinking is if you don't actually notice much trouble with your balance already, I'm still stressing it might be a good idea to get started on this type of exercise. One other thing I really want to be clear about is, keep in mind that people who do balance training still benefit from balance exercises. So I want to make sure you realize that the participants in these studies did benefit from the routine. But if you are already noticing that you're having some trouble with your stability or balance problems, it may be best to meet with a physical therapist and go over some individualized safety strategies. And then lastly, we can come to our final type of exercise on the next slide, and this will be flexibility training. Now, these are recommendations up on the slide that we have for flexibility training for people with Parkinson's. We all know that muscle stiffness and rigidity as well as some postural problems can affect people with Parkinson's. And with this flexibility exercise or flexibility training, we can work against a potential loss of range of motion by stretching periodically. The pictures I have on the slide are taken from the Be Active and Beyond booklet. And this gives you a few examples of exercises that specifically target muscle groups that often get tight from Parkinson's disease. As you can see, we recommend a 30-second hold, repeated 3 or 4 times for each muscle group. We also recommend maybe trying to do a little bit of movement, even just walking around the house for a minute or two, just to warm up your muscles before you get started with stretching. It'll tend to make it work a little better. I would also really encourage you to consider other ways of working this into your routine. So many group classes that you may have tried before will have a stretching component, either in the warm-up or cool-down. Things like yoga may also help with your flexibility if you enjoy going to a group class like that. So now we've covered the 4 kind of general categories of exercises. Really quickly, before we kind of wind down for your questions, I know I've covered a lot today, and it can feel like a big challenge to get this all in. But I wanted to go through a sample week together using the exercise log that's found in the back of the Be Active and Beyond booklet. So you can see each of the broad categories that we went through are represented in the black lines on this chart. So there's aerobic or endurance exercise, strength, flexibility, and then balance training. So let's take a typical patient. He knows he needs to do 150 minutes of aerobic exercise. So he takes 5 brisk walks per week. And you can see the 30-minute walks that he's writing down. He also follows the strengthening and the stretching routines from the Be Active and Beyond booklet, and he performs these twice a week as recommended. And he didn't have anyone give him specific balance exercise ideas, but he liked the idea of doing tango classes with his spouse, so he makes sure he makes time for this twice per week. So you can see this is just an example of how someone can get this all done probably about an hour or so per day. But that still might sound like a lot to you. So, what if you're still working and it's hard to find time for even that? So this example is someone who found a group exercise class that combines a few of the different types of exercise. So she found a boxing class, and it meets for an hour twice per week. So she counts half an hour towards the cardiovascular exercise and the balance training. She's either punching a heavy bag and getting the heart rate up, or doing the agility exercises. So both of those things involve complex footwork that helps her balance, but also gets the heart rate up that whole time. The other half of the class is stretching and core strengthening. So she's still checking off the stretching and strengthening exercises on this checklist. She also goes out for a long walk on Saturday, and then a 4th walk on Sunday, just to complete the cardiovascular exercise recommendations. So this is someone that's doing twice a week and a lot of work on the weekends. Wanted to bring all the recommendations together with this summary slide. The key is just remembering how the different types of exercises can help you. So I wanted to make sure I included on here the specific benefits we anticipate from each type of exercise for your Parkinson's symptoms under each of the exercise categories. There's also a little bit of information on common recommendations for the amount of time to do this in your week. But again, I want to emphasize that we'll be going into more detail on that in the next presentation next month. But just keep in mind, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So I hope this slide shows you that there's a lot of ways that you can get this done, and getting started wherever you can, and trying to work gradually towards these recommendations. Whatever you can do is going to be helpful. So now I was thinking I'd open it up to your questions. I saw some of them coming in as we went along, but I was hoping Teresa could help me, kind of go through your questions and we can chat about your routine and see what you'd like to work on.
Tim, thank you so much for such a great presentation. You covered so much information, and I know there are questions to get to, but great thanks to you for all that. We did have a question come in earlier to us. The question was, I'm already part of a spin class. Should I be doing walking as well as part of my exercise routine?
Oh, this is great. Yeah, so spin class is a great aerobic exercise, and it may actually be more intense in terms of how high they're getting their heart rate than going out for a walk. So if they're already meeting the exercise recommendations for how long they're getting their heart rate up from the spin class, walking would still be important. And this comes into something that in physical therapy, we call this task-specific training. So it's kind of picking something that's important to you and just practicing it. So sometimes when I have someone who's in really great shape and they want to maintain their walking ability over the next 10, 15 years, this is something that's really important to basically everyone. It's one of their top goals. So when you go out for a walk in that case, maybe think about it as you're just practicing a really important skill that you want to maintain. And maybe you think of that of your walk as more of that practice rather than an exercise, if that makes sense to everyone.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then we have a kind of a similar question from Deirdre and also Luann. The question is related to if there's been an injury due to a fall, either hip, knee, maybe someone's injured their back, what kind of exercises might you recommend to help someone kind of get back into a routine?
Yeah, I love this question. And it's something that we see a lot. And I would say, the first thing I would say is I don't want you to feel like you need to go it alone. So I hope that you've received a good course of rehab for your injury. And if you haven't, I would say really it's important to work with a physical therapist to just make sure that you're getting a lot of these types of exercises, but they're giving you really specific recommendations. Because this is something that will commonly happen to people. And a lot of these exercises are really important. Like strengthening is really important to help you come back from a hip injury. But you also want to make sure that your therapist is including some balance training as well to get you feeling safer and staying active over time. So I'd say those two are really important, just in the immediate post-operative course.
Absolutely. We had another question come in from Karan. He mentions having problems taking turns, and I know that's something we hear frequently from the patients that we see. His question is there anything, say, to be recommended or suggested to make it easier, make it possible to probably turn more safely?
Yeah, I think that's where some of those balance exercises that we had talked about could be really, really helpful. So I would love to see if you could meet with a therapist to go over some of those like specific types of agility drills and turning. I think we could get you a little safer as you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim, this is another great question. This one's from Michael. Could you speak to the benefits of participation in sports activities like tennis, he says, for example?
Oh, yeah, this is really great. Because I think this goes back to that last slide that I gave of someone who was working and they were going to boxing class twice a week, right? So there are some activities where you're kind of getting two benefits at once. And tennis is great because you have to be, light on your feet. You have to get to the ball to return it. You have to have really good agility and balance just to keep up with the game. But, if you're playing, intensely enough, you can have that heart rate up the whole time. So if you're kind of thinking about that chart I was showing you, this is another thing that I would count towards aerobic exercise and agility. Now that's sort of like physiologically what's happening, but I would say, Teresa, like how often do you see this? Just finding something that's really fun is really important too, because the best exercise routine is the one that you're really going to be able to stick to for months and years in the future. And so like something like tennis is really fun. You won't think twice about packing your bag and getting out there. So I think there's a lot of good motivation that can come from doing something like that. That's more of a sport.
Totally agree, Tim. Just as you said, that exercises can span more than one category that you kind of nicely laid out for us. And then something like tennis, just like you said, it's motivating. You make a time and a date to play with your partner, and you're going to keep that. So it has like very in terms of all good benefits of exercise. Tim, another question for you. This one's coming from Bradford. For strength training, is lower body strength training a priority over upper body? Is there a ratio you would recommend?
Yeah. So I would say, generally, I would say I do focus a lot more on the lower body than the upper body. And that goes back to some of that research I was telling everyone about how a lot of the bigger functional benefits come from working on your lower body as compared to the upper body, in terms of, improving your balance, improving things like getting up the flight of stairs, falls prevention. So I tend to do a lot more of that. I don't have a ratio off the top of my head, and I think there's some individual variation with this, because I'll also sometimes have people working on things like, so some of our listeners might notice like trouble getting up from bed, and there's that part of getting out of bed where you have to push with your arms. So the arms are important too, but I would try to have people focus a little bit more on the legs and core, with a little bit of work on the arms too.
Understand. Yeah. And Tim, I know this talk has generated so many questions. I think we have time for a couple more.
Yeah.
Question coming to us from Jeffrey, and he has a question related to data or information we have about people who may have a more advanced Parkinson's disease, showing the benefit with aerobic exercise, say for people who are a little more advanced.
Yeah. There aren't as many, larger research studies on that, but I still would say that it's an important priority for you, just to keep up your physical functioning and your overall health. And the encouragement I would want to give you is there are a lot of ways that we can work on that. So, there's a lot of new exercise equipment that we have and that are available in a lot of community gyms that you may be able to use. But I think it might be helpful to meet with a therapist just to see, if they can watch you do it and set you up with a good routine. So, I kind of tell my patients that that's the skill involved in my job. Is sort of like, we know generally what's a good idea for most people, but then, how do you tell one specific person exactly the best way for them to do it? So I definitely want to give you the encouragement there, and I hope that we could help you set up with a therapist as well, using the APDA rehab and referral center. So that's another nationally available resource for you.
Absolutely. And I know that's something that our office would love to help find a physical therapist in someone's area if they're just not familiar with a physical therapist who might be able to specialize more in Parkinson's disease. Tim, I think we had a comment actually from Bradford. He chimed in and said that pickleball is a good first step if tennis seems kind of demanding. And I know you and I have heard this from many people we work with who enjoy pickleball, covering a lot of the bases of the exercise.
Yeah, Bradford, thank you for mentioning that, because that's something that I've had so many people tell me about. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Thank you.
And Tim, I think we might just have time for one more question. This again is coming from Jeffrey, and he has a question in terms of brisk exercise. Is there a definition in terms of miles per hour Or would you answer that more on, say, a heart rate level, or kind of what's your take on that?
Yeah. I would usually recommend trying to match that either to a cadence or your heart rate, because it's difficult to know exactly how fast you should be going. And then we also, while we have someone walk, we want to make sure they're walking well, but also getting good exercise out of it at the same time. So there's sometimes a trade-off between your form and the heart rate. So there's definitely some individual variation there. Keeping the cadence around 100 steps per minute is sometimes a goal I'll work people to, but I have to make sure that's safe in person. So that's another thing. But I know that's a good lead in, I think, Teresa, to next month. I hate to say stay tuned, but I know, Teresa, next month you're going to be giving a lot of information on the optimal dosing of exercise, right?
That's right, Tim. And you're right. This is Jeffrey. Thank you. This was kind of a perfect question to lead into what we want to talk about next month. And I'll try to give I just build on Tim's great work and kind of give some recommendations about how do you know if what you're doing for exercise is enough? What are the recommendations? How hard to work? How do you measure that? So this is a conversation we'll definitely continue into next month. Tim, I want to thank you so much for the great presentation today. I think it generated a lot of questions, and we appreciate it so much.
Oh, thank you. And thanks everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate all your questions. I think one more time we can put up the APDA exercise helpline. I'm so sorry we can't get to everything in one talk. So if there's anything that we didn't get to, I really hope you'll give us a call, because we definitely would be happy to answer any questions, or even if I didn't get into enough detail on one of your questions, please do give us a ring, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Tim.
All right. Thank you, Teresa. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us.